Hello and welcome to another episode of Community Update. I am Promise Accord. Owning a home in Canada is a dream of many African immigrants who now live here, regardless of how long you have been here. As the African community continues to grow here in Nova Scotia, a number of its members are also buying and moving into their homes. But due to weather conditions and other environmental factors, which are different from what we are used to back in Africa, maintaining these properties can be very challenging. What do you look out for before and after you buy a home? Our guest today is Michael Martins Duebo, a Canadian certified home inspector who understands in what state a property should be before buying. Michael, thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you for this. I appreciate the call.
Let me start by asking, what is a home inspection?
A home inspection is a visual inspection of the house, non-invasive, by a professional home inspector. And I say a professional home inspector because home inspectors are specially trained to perform the tasks that we do during home inspections. But then I'll put it this other way. If you wanted to buy a home and wanted to do it some other way, you could have brought in a carpenter, brought in a plumber, brought in an electrician, a floor specialist, all these people. You couldn't literally achieve that just because you wanted to know what state a home is. But then there is that one person who typically is able to bring all this knowledge together as a sign agent and look at the house holistically and tell you what actually matters.
I think that's a very good place to start. But why should we worry about the inspection report? Home inspection report in this case. Why should it be a concern?
As with owning any property of such value, because we always say, and you know, that buying a home is one of the biggest investments one can ever make. I mean, houses in the city today sell for $1 million or even more, and I want to think that before anybody invests that kind of amount, you want to make sure that you understand exactly what's going on with that house, inside, outside. Are there any material issues? Are there any things that might come up in the short run? Is there anything that might cost me top dollar? All those things like that. You want to be sure that you have your risk known to you before committing to such purchases.
Now, talking about risk, and let's break it down to simplest possible, point for the understanding of our viewers. What are those things to look out for when we're talking about home inspection, prior to buying a home or after you buy a home?
That's a tricky question because myself, I have over a 500 checklist of what I look for, and there are things always going on in my head. It's tricky because it can easily become technical in terms of what I'm looking at. So sometimes you might see a crack in a foundation. Concrete do crack, and depending on how the crack presents itself, it might not be a problem at all. So if I ask a homeowner to look for crack and they see a crack that shouldn't be a problem at all, it just throws them off and it's confusing. So I'm not sure there is that silver bullet to answering that question for a homeowner as to what they can look for. But I think one thing that usually stands out could also be the look and feel. Like when you come to a home, how meticulously taken care of is it? Do you see the windows not painted? Is it wood? Wood generally needs a little bit more love than synthetic materials like vinyl. You look at the driveway, is it well paved? Are there lots of cracks? What I tend to do with things like that is I'm trying to understand what the habits or the routine maintenance practices of whoever is selling this house has. Are the people who will typically continue maintenance or just let it slip?
So you talked about the looks and feels of a house, but some would say some of this could be covered up with the paint, for instance. But we're interested in knowing the state of that house before we move in or before we buy the property. And they could say, okay, there are markings on the walls, like water markings and stuff like that. But on a high level, what would you be telling your customers, those who patronize you, to look out for? Is it the cracks on the concrete? Is it the roof, the leakage on the roof? Is it any other thing that we probably don't know that you want us to be aware of?
So what I will typically look out for is first thing is things that keep you comfortable in your house,
Right.
which will typically be your roofing, your exterior doors,
Okay.
windows,
Mhm.
and the visible portion of anywhere that should have some air or barriers, which will be maybe insulation and all that, because you need to be warm in your house and you need to be comfortable in your house.
Yeah.
So next thing I am typically looking out for is the electrical system. You
Okay.
also need to be safe in your house. Electricals can be one place where fires can start easily, and that's one really great area in terms of where people know a lot and where people usually don't want to play in, because electricity is just outright dangerous if you don't know how to treat it. Another thing is plumbing, because we know how water can damage property furnishings,
Mhm.
and you can't live in a house that has significant water damage. That's
Yeah.
also going to be another area. So for me, the key pillars is being comfortable in your house, your
Yeah.
roof, your insulation, your windows, your doors, electrical, being safe. You're sure that you can turn on heating, you can use equipment and all that in your house safely, and then plumbing, that you can use water and all that
Yeah.
also, and that the house doesn't leak. I think every other thing you can walk around that.
Right, Michael. Before we get into the report in depth, I want to ask a question. How do we identify the right people to hand over this job to? Are they just anyone who knows how plumbing works, anyone who knows how carpentry works, or how the roofing is usually placed on the building? Who exactly are we supposed to be approaching when it comes to home inspection?
The professional word is there for a reason, and home inspectors should be professional, because there is honestly there is a significant body of knowledge
Yeah.
in terms of home inspect. It's a never-ending journey. I'm not even close to getting to the point where I think that I know it all, and I know people in the industry who've been there donkey amount of years, and it's the same thing. So
Yeah, so what I wanted to say actually is, do they have some kind of special training and certifications that make them, good enough to take care of inspection of a home? What
good,
would you
yes.
say?
I was just jumping to that in
Good,
terms of the knowledge. So the
good.
knowledge is, first things first, they do have to be certified, and here in Nova Scotia, um, there isn't any actual regulatory body, but there are actually bodies that certify home inspectors. Point being that anybody can walk out there and say they're a home inspector, but
Right.
you shouldn't hire them until you have checked that they're certified by the Canadian Association of Home and Property Inspectors, CAPI. They're certified by International Association of Certified Home Inspectors. Those are generally the two main bodies that certify home inspectors for performing home inspections. There are other, I mean, bodies too, that for other ancillary services like wood energy technology transfer,
Right.
like the sewer line that you perform,
Mhm.
like the Radon Association of Scientists and all that. So there are other smaller bodies, but the body that generally oversees professional home inspectors will be Canadian Association of Home and Property Inspectors and the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors, at least here in Nova Scotia.
That's very interesting to know. In other words, if they are not professionals, don't patronize them, right? So, Michael, can you walk us through what an inspection looks like from when that call comes to you that I'm
Right.
interested in this property? What are you going to be doing? And what do you expect the caller, in this case, the customer who has called you to that task, what would you want them to know about the process leading to handing them a report?
I think first thing for me is trust. You need to first of all trust that you're hiring someone who will go and look into this property and who is working in your interest.
Right.
So that's first things first. And then for me, once I get that request for a home inspection, that's when the home inspection starts actually,
Right.
because that's when I go on the internet. I'm looking for pictures of this house. I'm trying to look at the location of the house. get information like how old the house is, how big of a house is it, where is it located at. I mean, from pictures alone, there are a lot I can make. What that helps me do is before I get to the property, I already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things. I'm like, hey, I'm already seeing things here that give me some type of concern. Well, that's how I work. I don't know if that's how everybody else works, but that's how I work.
Okay.
And then when I get to the property, my approach is a bit dynamic because we're all different. So I don't have a one size fits all approach.
Right.
I look at the whole event as it moves,
Yeah.
and then I'm looking at the situation. I'm looking at the bias to say, hey, are they picking up any cues that I want to elucidate more on? I generally try to get a feel for what bothers them.
Right.
Why are they here today? What do they want to learn? But in the end, I still stay focused that what I'm here to do is look for the things that they typically wouldn't see. And that's why I'm the professional there. So I'm looking deeper than what they see. So I let them go around the house and look at the more obvious things while I'm going around looking for the more latent issues. And then in the end, I'll usually have a conversation to say, hey, I mean, is there anything that bothers you? What do you think? And then that's when I also say, hey, 1, 2, 3 are the things that I think you should look at. But anyways, all that will be in the report that I hope you would look through, and then give me a call if you have
Interesting. So
concerns.
the report itself, let's
It's
delve
binding.
into it. Some people are a bit jittery.
Right.
I have a report, and there are some concerning issues there. How would you advise your client to approach the would-be, sellers of this property with this report? How do they get to them to say, can you fix this, or can we discuss this? I mean, what's usually the advice you give to your client in this case?
Usually, I always say that every single property comes with some type of issues, but you need to understand the gravity of the hierarchy.
Right.
The market is tricky, and I'm sure that you're working with a realtor who's experienced and who understands negotiating skills and who understands the things that matters and the things that don't. Because I say that all the time. There will be things that matter, and there will be things that don't. But with every house, something always comes up. And then in my reports, I always put some pecking order in it. I always say priority issues, repairs, notes, maintenance, and all that kind of stuff. In the end, I usually say you'd have to measure your risk versus almost like a risk versus reward approach to say, hey, there's so many factors. How much am I getting this house? What type of a house is it? Is it more of a newer house? Is it an older house? The issues there, do I need to fix them right away, or can I live with them? I think those will be usually the better questions to ask me. But in terms of what the clients need to really act on, I'm typically not in that discussion, because I find that usually happens with their realtor, because that's when negotiation starts, and that's beyond my pay grade.
Right. So obviously you're giving us your opinion in this case. You're not speaking for the association or from any authority point of view. But first-time homeowners, they get very excited about just jumping into the house. Now we're telling them, be careful. You need to get a report and see the state of things.
Right.
Who pays the fees of an inspector? Is it the seller of the property? Is it the buyer of the property? Or is it a combination of both?
Yes, because home inspectors are designed to be independent.
Okay.
No type of interference and all that, because I work for the buyer exclusively. The buyer pays the fees.
All right.
I work for the buyer exclusively, so they hire me as an independent home inspector to look at the house for them.
I know it might be difficult for you to come up with numbers, but let's say of every 5 home buyers, especially from the African community, the immigrants in this case.
I think they do. I think people do perform inspections.
Yeah.
I think they do.
Probably the question is it a mandatory requirement?
No.
To buy a house. So I see a situation where some people would say, does it really matter? I mean, whatever becomes of the house, I don't care. So would you think the community in particular, like I mentioned, the African community here in Nova Scotia, do you find people interested in, doing this part of the process?
I find that they aren't really enthusiastic about it.
Okay.
I feel like sometimes it does pass off as a checkbox. That's
Okay.
what I perceive sometimes,
Yeah.
which it shouldn't be. But then I would hope that people take it seriously, because then once you bought a home, everything in terms of the liability and in terms of the maintainability and in terms of the reliability,
Right.
it falls on your lap.
Good.
And the only time to address some of all these issues is pre-buying that home, because in the end you have to be able to gauge what's your level of what you can do. So for instance, someone like me, my list is really, really long about things that I can take on. So I might get a report and get a 20 list item. I'm like, no problems, don't worry about it. And then yourself, you might say, I'm not good with tools. I really don't want to bother, right? I'm busy, I have to work, I've got XYZ to do.
Yeah.
I really don't want to be bothered about this thing. Can we only have 1, 2 on my list? So it usually varies in terms of what people are able to take on for
Right.
maintainability and repairs.
You've done so much, giving us this education about home inspection.
Right.
What will be your final thoughts? You have a company, and I guess you're doing
Right.
very well. You seem
Right.
to own the entire
I'm
community.
doing decent.
What's your final thought to our viewers before I let you go?
Absolutely, home inspection is important. I couldn't buy a property without doing a home inspection.
Right.
That's just the honest truth. I
Right.
couldn't buy a property because if I look at the risk versus reward, it's there. I'm spending. I mean, the average price for a home inspection is between $400 to $600,
Right.
and the average price of a home is between 400 to 600,000. I think that buying peace of mind for $400 to $600 is really worth it, because in the end, a home inspector looks at a certain things and says, hey, this is what you need to do, or
Right.
probably doesn't talk about something. You can always go back to document. That's why it's important to hire someone who is certified. So let's say I miss something significant and you give me a shout, I'm like, please leave me alone, I don't know what you're talking about. You can reach out to CAPI. I'm a member of Canadian Association of Home and Property
Okay.
Inspectors. You can reach out to CAPI and say, hey, I have this inspector of yours, XYZ happened. You can reach out to Internachi. I'm also a member of Internachi. I'm a member of at least 5 of all these bodies. So that's why it's important to hire someone who's really certified. Look at the credentials, look at their education, their
Right.
background, continuous education, what they have on there on the internet, and all that. But there's no doubt a home inspection is just so. And then please read the report
Okay.
and act on what comes out of the report. Read every single thing in the report. Ask questions.
Good.
Ask
Good.
questions.
Good.
No questions are stupid. Ask questions and act on it.
I love that part. But where can they get you? How can these people reach out to you in 2 seconds?
In 2 seconds.
Yes.
Maybe not. Maybe not, but I do a lot of responding to emails.
Good.
So half of the time, or most of the time in the
You have a
day-
website? That
Oh, I
that's the
do
question.
have a
Yeah. So
website.
what's the website?
So my website is acetechhomeinspections.ca. ACETECH homeinspections.ca.
Right.
My email address is info@acetechhomeinspections.ca. I do respond to all sorts of emails. I think the best way to get any type of information from me is via email.
Right.
You should shoot me an email. I'm 100% sure to respond.
I feel this is the right place to leave it at. And that was Michael Udoebo, certified Canadian home inspector here in Nova Scotia. Thank you so much for being in our show today.
Thank you, Promise. I appreciate the call. It was a pleasure being here.
Remember to subscribe to this channel and get notified when we have a new update. I am Promise Okoy, and I'll see you next time.